I think there is some people who lost fortunes to the fortune tellers. The person comes over for a reading. They say, what's going to happen? I have problems in my family. And she starts saying, okay, you have a course.
Right.
I'm going to take away that course. It's going to cost you only, I don't know, $25. And then she starts doing that manipulation, whatever. And then she said, but there is something else much more dangerous is coming. I can block that for you. It's going to cost you $1,000. And then they come back and they said, I see something coming really, really, really bad, but we can do that. We're going to take care of this. Just trust me. We're going to take care of this. Because this house you live right now, it's a cursed house. And unless you give it away, you're not going to be happy. You're going to die. You got to give away this house. And of course, you got to give it to me because I'm the one's going to clean it, and I'm going to give it to you back clean.
I remember getting a crystal ball reading by this gal, and she was so accurate, it kind of freaked me out. And I asked her, how did you know that? And she said, well, you can do this too. I said, no, I can't. She said, yes, you can. You just need to learn to focus your mind. And remember, because most humans, by the time they're 7 years of age, have blocked off or shut off that communication from their soul and their subconscious. So that's when I started into classes, I started to open up my intuition. And one of the things over time, it didn't happen immediately, was I started to sense my spiritual guidance system. And it started with journaling. When I would journal, I probably dumped out a lot of emotional stuff into my journal. And as I would be writing, I would feel this shift in awareness or consciousness where instead of writing like Katherine talking, I would get this guidance that would come in that said, Dear One. And it would be speaking to me, and it would only speak in love. It would speak in illuminated thoughts. It would give me guidance. And I started to ask, are you my guides? And I also had an awareness, because I am a painter and an artist, that I could channel imagery onto canvas from what I was feeling and sensing. So I would sit down at my canvas and I would start painting a face, and I would I would ask, "Are you one of my guides?" And I didn't always know for sure, but both through writing and my painting, I began to open up that conversation through my intention and my prayers. And over uh, time, I began to get guidance to do something called soul portraits and spirit guide paintings when I asked how my art and spirituality came together. But even before that, I remember I owned a metaphysical store, and someone told me and said, "Hey, you're a Michaelite." And I said, "What do you mean I'm a Michaelite?" And they said, "Well, Archangel Michael's like your boss. You're one of the team on Earth that works with Archangel Michael." So that didn't necessarily ring true. I was curious about it. But the more I've gone along, I've realized Archangel Michael is one of my bigger guides. Everything I understand at this point through my intuition and how I've worked with my guidance system is that we're all born with 5 to 7 personal guides. And we may have some larger divine beings, such as archangels or ascended masters, that we also are connected to and work with. And that's revealed itself over time. A lot of times my creativity, my artwork, and my spiritual work of prayer, intention, sitting in meditation has helped open up all those avenues that I can perceive them. It's funny, I used to think, as much as in that white light experience, I could see that hallway, I've thought for many years, I can't see anything. I feel, I sense, I hear. And when I started doing soul portraits and spirit guide paintings for other people, it kind of scared me at first because I wasn't sure if I could hear anything or know anything. But what it's done for me is that I realized that I'm a translator of energy, that I may get it in different ways psychically, through my feeling sense, or I'm clairaudient quite often. But then when I start to paint, I start to get the imagery, and it's like a conversation that I put onto canvas, and then I get the guidance that goes with it. So it's been developed over time through these different activities.
So you're talking about guides. Do we all have guides? And he said everybody has about 5 guides. Everyone, or it's a different variation from different people?
Before we're born, everything I understand is that we basically have a meeting before we choose to incarnate, and we've got a higher guidance team, and it, it's our council, our spiritual council. I've heard described many times that we have 10 to 12 beings on our spiritual council who help us decide what is the purpose of our life, what's the blueprint, what do we want to learn, what do we want to heal, why are we going to come into this place to experience. And at that time, we also have like the Harry Potter sorting hat in that we've got beings, whether they be angels, people we've incarnated with that are not going to be in body while we're on earth, ancestors, that we basically have a conversation and begin to choose and plan who's going to support us in this life from the other side, not being in a body. And I feel strongly, no matter whether someone's a good or a bad person in life, is that ultimately at a soul level, before we incarnate, that there is a purpose, a higher purpose for everybody coming here. Whether someone follows that, I can't say that obviously we've got bad people in this world who are not doing good stuff, that are, triggering really horrible things. So bad guides, everybody on the other side of the veil, so to speak, is not necessarily living in a higher consciousness. I agree with you. Uh, does that mean someone's got a negative guide? It's funny, I haven't really thought about this a ton, but yes, people can have bad guidance if they are. I think of it in terms of levels and vibration, that there's different levels. If let's say that someone's coming in, they've got trauma, they're struggling, and they're leaning into that negative aspect of their personality in this life because of those things. There can be beings who are stuck in the astral realm who can be more present in their consciousness than, say, their higher guides. If they have, I believe everyone does have angels or higher dimensional guides that want to steer them to more light, more love. But because we have free will, I know that people obviously are choosing other than love. And that could be their whole purpose to be here, is to break through trauma and to move toward love. It doesn't mean they'll accomplish it this life. They may be hanging out more with these lower frequency thought forms, beings who can be stuck in the astral realm. I mean, just because someone dies and goes into the other dimensions doesn't mean that they're going to be positive or awake. So I don't know if that specifically hits it, but that's what I understand at this point. I feel like there's uh, also people who come in contrary, meaning that they may look awful, like, say, a Hitler or someone who's played a terrible role in history. I hate to think that there's a higher purpose for what they did because it was such a negative, awful thing that they did. But on some level, there was learning opportunities for all of us to heal, to grow, to love, that this is a dualistic reality that we've come into, and that we all have choice which way we want to go. So when someone prays for help and asks their guides or God to come in, I believe strongly if they're open to it, that higher information and higher guidance system will come in for them. However, if they're stuck in their lower egoic self that's negative, that's hateful, then they're going to attract that to continue to drive them. And they're not even going to be open to that higher healing that can come in.
Okay, how do you recognize or distinguish a good person from a bad person?
Frequency, their actions, their words, their energy.
Okay, so you can feel that right away. Let's say you enter the room, there is 10 people, and you can feel who is a, I don't want to use this very trivial word, bad person or good person, because it just portrays black and white, which is not.
It's kind of interesting how I've been guided to do soul portraits and what that's about. And then to answer your question is, in everyone's auric field and that quantum energy that is around you, you have symbols, you have energy that is present, current energy that you're emitting through your thoughts, your feelings, your agitation, your love, whatever you are centered in your consciousness and your response to the world or your reaction to the world will send out an energy. Now, harmonious energies, when people have open hearts, they feel grounded, they are happy, their energy field is soft. They may have a robust field, but it's full of life force, it's full of light, and it has this yummy feeling. It's like going to a buffet and it's emitting this generous, loving energy that has a softness to it, or a harmonious feeling. If someone is carrying trauma, fright, or fear, and they're agitated, they're cranky, they're frustrated, even if they put on a nice face, they're going to have spiky energy in their field. It's going to be, if someone is sensitive gets close to them, it may feel agitating to you. It might be like drinking too much coffee. It's like, oh, that doesn't, and it's not that that's a bad person. It's that their field of energy is showing you broken patterns. We are all expressing energy and patterns at all times. If it's made of fear or fright, or someone's gone through trauma, let's say they're depressed, there can be dark spots in their energy bodies that feel like void, or it might feel cold. But if it's causing agitation in them because they're afraid, it'll still feel spiky. If someone's critical, it's really spiky. And again, it doesn't mean they're a bad person. It means that they have this stuck energy that is blocking them from opening their hearts. And it may be conscious, it may not be conscious. If they're actively engaging with it, they may be ugly in terms of the way they act. And you go, whoa, I don't want to be around that. And it could be that they just frowned at you and didn't do anything else. However, as we develop compassion, we have more capacity to be in a room with people that may not feel loving, but that compassion can actually be a healing energy that we don't do anything to fix anybody. We just have a field of compassion and love that we're emitting, and it can soften that person and make them feel safe. That's one of the things I've become aware of. It's like, don't judge a book by its cover. Is that the more we grow spiritually and have the ability to look at someone with love and non-judgment, that person can soften because we're not sending that spiky energy back at them. So we're all interacting with each other at the same, all the time. If we're in judgment for people because we're afraid that they're going to hurt us, we're only going to feed that negativity. But if we can stand there and feel compassionate and emit love towards someone without any expectation, there's a really good chance that person's going to soften while they're in your presence. That's one thing I've learned over years from everything I do, especially teaching, is that if I hold a safe and loving container for people to enter into my home, enter into my work, they heal. And I don't do anything to them except hold an energy of kindness and compassion. And that can change everything. If more of us were able to do that in our world, we would find that a lot would shift. However, we've been imprinted to be against each other, to be afraid of one another. And that's one thing I would love to help cultivate change with. So that if there is dark energy in someone, in a compassionate, observing place, I can still perceive if I'm safe to be in their presence as I'm in a safe place for myself, if that makes love. So it's not, you're right, it's not black and white. There's a lot of gray in there. And when I do soul portraits, the thing that taught me uh, in the guidance that came in, I literally got this download after I prayed about it. I heard inwardly soul portraits, and it was a packet of energy and information. I knew exactly what it meant. It kind of scared me because I didn't know, oh God, I don't want to be in the hot seat. I had psychics who worked for me out of this store. And yet, when I finally came to sitting and doing this, I realized that my job wasn't just to read the energetic field of someone in this human life now, but it was go more to core of soul, where I would connect to their symbol system of different lifetimes of their essence and not just one life. And so that what that's taught me in my experiences so far is that at the core of every human, no matter what they've gone through, I feel like there is light. And in that light means that they're all divine beings, even if they're acting like a dark, negative, evil person in a life. I had this experience early on where I felt like I could go to a prison, meet the worst of the worst criminals, and if I could go sit with them in that heart space and that clarity to look at their soul and not just this person sitting in prison, I felt like I could penetrate to the core of their goodness and get beyond all the badness, and that could possibly bring them healing if they could just see their light and not all the horrible things that they'd either done or been exposed to.
Well, people like this are called empaths, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
And the empaths, they can take negative energy on themselves as well. How do you deal with that? Let's say you have to live with a person in the same house. Maybe a child, maybe a spouse, maybe a parent. You just can't abandon them at this point in their life. But they're very negative and very critical, like you said. And just a lot of negativity every day. May depress them. How do you deal with that so they don't drag you down?
Well, it's taken me quite a few years to get better at that because I wasn't in the beginning. And some of the things I've learned are just like taking a shower every day. We need to work with cleaning our energy every day. Going out in nature is a really good way to clean your energy field and to get clear of low frequency energy. So anything from smudging to prayer to taking 100% responsibility for your own energy field. And that will ultimately mean better boundaries and sometimes having to step away, developing compassion for people and knowing that it's not yours to fix them and it's not yours to take their crap either. That you have to learn some good boundaries of saying, no, this is not okay. But let's say it's just a depressed person in your house, and that's really hard too. And so that compassion can be helpful, but also self care is always important. So I'm like, smudge the house, smudge yourself, go ground yourself outside, uh, do everything you can to create a good energy in the home, clean the energy of the home. And if you do have a good relationship with that person who's so negativity, if there's open to a conversation, you might encourage them to get out. But oftentimes that's not going to happen. So you have to choose what you step away from and what you can tolerate and still take care of yourself. One thing I learned over the years, and I'm in my 60s now, I've been around a little bit, is that because I went through trauma when I was younger, and I think before this lifetime, I learned that I put up with a lot that was not good for me. And I think empathic people or people who've gone through trauma often do that, is that we will put up with a lot of difficult situations, maybe even unsafe situations, or just situations that are not good for us as we try and figure out how to heal ourselves or take care of ourselves. So the idea that someone puts themselves first, to love themselves enough to know that they can step away when someone's volatile or has a negative energy, but also to do our best not to take it all personally. There's like this edge of like, what is good for me? How do I take care of myself without judging that person? But also, how do I not suck in that energy? So with working outside and grounding, there are many exercises to do to build your auric field with positive light. That's why shamanism's made a comeback, and this idea of going out into nature and getting the positive ions is that it's filled with life force. That's why qigong is good, and martial arts are good. Is that as we bring this energy in intentionally and through our activity, is that our auric field gets bigger and higher frequency. So the whole thing is about frequency. If we identify with the negativity of who's in our home, our frequency drops and we're going to be in the minutia with them. We're going to be in the tough stuff. If we can raise our energy by working with nature, working with grounding, working with meditations that expand the light in our field, then we're going to find that we can tolerate a whole lot more without dividing ourselves from others.
Now, let's talk about your tarot reading a little bit. I don't know if I pronounced that right. Tarot, tarot.
Yeah, tarot.
How did you get into this, and how accurate is tarot reading in your opinion? How accurate? Because let's say you predict something, what's going to happen. Do you get confirmation with the future events that your cards will write or not?
That's a good question, actually, because, and I have an interesting answer. I probably am not like every other tarot reader at this point. Um, I've owned a couple of metaphysical stores over the last 30 years, my 30s and early 40s. And um, I got the opportunity to illustrate a divine feminine tarot deck. It's called the Mythical Goddess Tarot. Now, I met the author in one of my stores in the 90s, and she became a good friend, and she saw some artwork, which is nothing like I'm doing now. And so she's like, I think you're the artist of my deck. And what's interesting is that for all the years I'd owned a metaphysical store, I did not resonate with tarot because of all the scary imagery in it. I'm like, oh, this doesn't look like anything I can relate to. I didn't understand it. I liked oracle decks. So, and it took more than a few years for me to finally get on board to doing this deck. Life happened. It took quite a few years. But when I came around to it, I had gone to Rome with two 70-year-old artists, women artists, to see it pre-patriarchy. So I got this whole good education and inspiration about the goddess and the divine feminine. It all finally wove together in the early 2000s. And Sage was an amazing tarot reader. She had begun reading tarot in her teens and got this vision when she was 17. But so many years later, we came together. So I learned it through her and through making this deck. And what's interesting is we took it back to the elements, we took it back to the divine feminine, and it still has a very positive imagery and flow. And we don't even use upside down cards. We read it a little differently. The images have been kind of updated to go along with 22 major arcana with goddesses, things like that. Anyway, so as I became a reader after helping create this deck, one of the things I realized is that it was coming into the Aquarian age too as part of it, taking it out of the dark ages. Much of the tarot is associated with the dark ages, with being able to access these symbol systems that were esoteric but had to be hidden. And so we're like unhiding everything. We want everybody to be able to use their intuition to look at the image, to grok the feeling, the sensation of it, and learn about the symbology. So as I've been working with it, one of the things that's been important for me is to realize is that I don't predict. I read the energy patterns. And that is part of how I do it a little different, because I feel like we're at a different time than we were 25, 50 years ago or 100 years ago, that things in the auric field or the quantum field can change much more quickly. They're not as set in stone necessarily. Some are, for sure. And so when I'm looking at the cards and I'm connecting to my client and what their question is, it's more like I'm validating them and telling them this is the energy I see taking place now. And if you do this, this, and this according to the reading, you're going to have a certain outcome. If you ignore that, you're going to be ignoring some of this guidance. I don't know if I can give you a percentage of where I feel like I've had great outcomes with people, but I have had a lot of success of people coming to be empowered to know that they're choosing their reality and it's not happening to them. So that's part of my perspective stepping in. I mean, for years, I've watched psychics in my store kind of like pull people along to get them to predict their futures instead of teaching them how to create their futures. And so I'm coming from the camp of I'm here to help you understand the energy that you're generating right now, how that relates to your question, and what you need to do different to come into greater harmony, or how you want to create your life instead of just predicting a future, if that makes sense.
Okay, Catherine, let me ask you this. Are you doing this tarot? Did I pronounce right? Tarot, how do I say it correct?
Tarot.
Tarot. Are you doing this tarot reading for money? Or are you doing this just because you want to help people? I mean, what's your main motivation? Or do you have this like a purpose in life to do this? The reason I ask you is this, because I live in Eastern Europe, and most of fortune tellers and tarot readings are gypsies, and they're doing this strictly for money. They're doing this through fear mongering, crazy fear mongering. Let's say they find a person who is in trouble, and they feel that like a dog smells the fear. They smell the desperation of this person, and they know they're gonna get a lot of money from this person. I think there is some people who lost fortunes to the fortune tellers. The person comes over for a reading. They say, "What's going to happen? I have problems in my family." And she starts saying, "Okay, you have a course.
Right.
I'm going to take away that course. It's going to cost you only, I don't know, $25." And then she starts doing that manipulation, whatever. And then she said, "But there is something else much more dangerous is coming. I can block that for you. It's going to cost you $1,000." And then they come back and they said, "I see something coming really, really, really bad, but we can do that. We're going to take care of this. Just trust me. We're going to take care of this. Because this house you live right now, it's a cursed house. And unless you give it away, you're not going to be happy. You're going to die. You got to give away this house. And of course, you got to give it to me because I'm the one's going to clean it and I'm going to give it to you back clean." So manipulations like this, I'm just making this up right now, but probably the gypsies are making up exactly like that. And you
That's
see,
terrible.
it's terrible. It's to fear. And I wonder,
Yeah.
what's your, because you said you can see the energy of the people, and I can see that a little bit too. And I can see your light energy. You have a great, beautiful energy. And I'm
Thank
pretty
you so
sure,
much.
they're pretty sure you're not doing this to scare people. So this is why I'm asking you, what's your main motivation? Do you feel like it's your calling in life to help people? Of course, you got to survive. You need to be paid. Yeah, it's a long question, but you probably understood what I'm asking.
Absolutely. And I saw that in my store. I had 9 psychics who worked for me back when I was 30 something and owned this first metaphysical store. And most of them were good, but I had a couple of sisters who I started to see them repeatedly have their clients come back every week. And I had a gal, uh, it was hard for me. I couldn't understand it. I could not understand why anybody would do anything. My goal is always to help and empower people. And no matter what I do, whether I'm teaching, I'm a teacher at heart. And so a lot of whether it's tarot or my soul portraits or a class, it's always about educating people and empowering them. So that is horrendous. It's very karmic. I can't even imagine someone doing that. It's horrible because when I work with people, they hire me. That's part of what I do in the world. So yes, they do pay me, but it's a clear flat rate, and I often give them extra time. And my goal is to help them see the situation at hand that they're concerned about. And what's interesting is I actually had a client yesterday who has sought out many readers, many helpers, because she doesn't feel like she can connect and she's always needing validation. And I could see how often fear was what was causing her to need help, is that there was always this element of fear. And I'm like, my main goal as I recognized that with her was to bring her back to the fact that that was what she was needing to get help clearing, not for more money, but both through the conversation, anything else, was to help her come back to love helping her choose her life and to help her get present in the now moment, not afraid of the future, not afraid of the past. So, my whole, it comes back to that white light experience. The only answer is love, as far as I'm concerned. And if there's people being gypsies, psychics, or whatever, and they're manipulating and taking advantage of people, shame on them. That will come back to bite them in the butt at some point. And I know it goes on, but I'm here to say it doesn't have to be that way. And if there's anybody out there that this has happened to, or they find a psychic that tells them something and they need more money, then they need to back off and take a look at them and see, is this really in my best interest? I started educating people 30 some odd years ago about that, when I started to see that happening, that people, because they're in the world of spirituality, does not mean that they're illuminated.
See, but you just said that the person has to kind of get back and figure out what's going on. But when the person is in trouble, he's very vulnerable, and he is desperate, he or she desperate. And this psychic or this fortune teller, they have the ability to make the person feel like they're safe with them, and this is the one, she or he is the only hope for them to survive and to get out of trouble. By the way, I never heard of a male psychic. It's only woman. Why is that?
There actually are some I've met, but there are definitely a lot more women that you find in the field for
How
whatever
do you
reason.
explain that? I mean, I never heard of a tarot reading male. That's 100% never, because I had some psychics male on my show, but most are women. I say 90%. How do you explain that?
Well, I see the same thing of people who show up for classes and ceremonies. I attract way more women than I do men.
Yeah.
Now, my shamanic teachers, male and female couple, they attracted a very well balanced male and female energy. But I've met one or two male tarot readers over the years because I used to do psychic fairs. I don't do them anymore, but there are not as many. That is for sure. I don't have any explanation of it
Yeah,
this day and
because
age.
I think women are more inclined to spirituality. I have this YouTube channel with my podcast, and there are statistics. You probably have a YouTube channel too. And you can look in the statistics, you can see who is more the woman and the male and female, and much more female. Not much more, but I would say 65% are female and about 35, maybe 60-40. More females are more interested in spirituality. And
You mean with
the age is like starting from 35, that the most people that are looking for this information are between like 54 to 65, something like that. Yeah. All right. Now, you mentioned that these people who take advantage of other people, they may acquire a bad karma.
absolutely.
They are not afraid of this karma, because I've seen all these gypsies, they have crosses, and they have a lot of pictures of Jesus around them, and they are like so righteous and so religious, and they're not afraid to acquire this bad karma.
Well, they must have some belief system in their conscious mind that they can manage in this life to feel like that's not going to happen. That probably has some great power in it. However, I do know that when we leave these bodies, we have a life review. and that they will have to answer at that point, if not before then, and that it will be taken care of at some point. And I want to mention a book and somebody I met many years ago, Daniel Brinkley, Saved by the Light. He's a little older than me right now, but he had a very fascinating story. I sold his books back in the 90s when I had my store and got to meet him. He used to be an assassin for the United States government. And of course, he didn't have any qualms about doing what he did. That was his job. And but he had this thing happen to him. He was home in Arkansas, and he was on the phone back in the 80s or so, back when we had phones with wires on them and not cell phones. And there's a lightning storm. And while he was on the phone, the lightning came and went through the line, blew him on the bed. His shoes were, do you know who he is?
No,
His
I had one guest. I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt you. I had one guest, Sharon. Sharon Milliman, I believe her last name, and she had the same experience. She was sitting on the porch, and there was raining or thundering, and she had a cordless phone, not a cordless,
Yep.
and that thunderbolt just went through the phone, and she had a near-death experience. So I'm sorry I interrupted you. Go ahead.
No, it's okay. Well, that's what happened to him is that, he had this amazing experience. Wasn't amazing at the time. He was blown on the bed. They came and got him. They took him to the hospital. He was pronounced dead for so many minutes. They put his toe tag on and the sheet over his head. His friend came to see him, had heard what happened, but he had come back, and he was blowing on the sheet trying to get people to know that he wasn't dead. But while he was gone, he had a life review. And so everything he had ever done to another person, he had to go through that experience. So he felt the horror of murdering this man. He felt the horror of his family who were in another room. He felt all of that. And then he was shown the future. And he came back, and he was it took a while to heal his body, but he was psychic after this, which often happens when somebody's hit by lightning like that, is that it opens them up. And so he went on to write this book, Saved by the Light. And I remember reading that, and then I met him, and we had an interesting experience. But that impacted me about what I know, and from my own white light experience later. And then what he went through is that I am pretty darn sure from these experiences, well, that was his experience, but my own experiences, is that we cannot get away what we do in this world. We cannot get away from the good we do or the bad we do, that at some point we will have to become responsible. And so when people have no morality about them, they may live their whole life and never get it.
Yeah, some people think that okay, I'm just following the orders. This is not me. I was told to do this. Like this person, is he still around? By the way, this author
Yes,
of
he's
Save.
still alive.
Okay, what's his name? I'm going to invite him to my show.
You'd love him. Daniel Brinkley. It's Dannon, and Brinkley, Brinkley.
Yeah,
He's
because
become quite famous.
he's got a great backstory. I mean, being an assassin and then becoming a saint is crazy. This is a movie right there.
Yep.
Yeah, because to continue my thought, let's say you go to war and you have to follow the orders and you have to kill because you're following the orders. That's still your karma. But is it better to get yourself killed? I mean, is it better for your karma to get yourself killed and finish your journey on this earth and not acquire bad karma by killing somebody else? Or just follow the words and stay alive and continue your journey here?
That's a great question. I don't know if I know the complete answer, but as you say that, and I think of Gandhi from what I know about him, because I know he was murdered, and that I believe when he left in the way that it happened, I could have the story wrong, but that he faced his person who murdered him and was forgiving him at the same time.
Yeah.
And a more enlightened being could possibly be to let go of your body and quit engaging in the conflict in this reality. Is that we are actually eternal beings, but in our human selves, we don't want to lose our lives. And so we make these choices, and these are part of our soul growth opportunities. So the question is, what do you do? Every choice you make at some level is your opportunity to grow on a soul level, to understand the preciousness of life. And that even though we've been given this life in this body, that our souls are eternal. And through lifetime after lifetime, we cultivate wisdom. And so a wise soul might choose not to go to war and not to be in conflict. What would I do if somebody walked into my house and wanted to shoot me? I don't know how evolved I am yet. I don't know if what I would do at this moment. But in this life, I'm not gone to war. And yet I come from a father who's a prisoner of war of the Japanese in World War II, and understand some of the trauma that was passed on through the DNA. So a lot of what all of us souls are working out on this planet is a lot of trauma. And our karma is basically what we've come to learn. It's not necessarily a punishment, even though I think a lot of people think it is. It's about becoming more aware in the long run to know how to choose and create your life. But that doesn't mean if you're in a war-torn country that you're going to get out of it. Uh, but it is always consciously choosing. I know that there's been a lot of conscious objectors to war.
Yeah.
And if you get into, but my brother was in Vietnam, and I know what he went through, and he was not the same person when he came home. And
Yeah.
I can attest that war is a horrible thing that someone has to choose how to respond to.
Yeah. Because, I mean, what's happening right now in the world? There is war in Ukraine, there is war in Israel, Palestine, and all these world leaders, they think that they are doing the right thing. And then, you have to defend your country
Right.
because you're defending all the people and you're doing what you have to do. But then you'll have to acquire the karma, which
That's right.
again,
I've had life memories of being a leader that made some decisions that got my people killed.
yeah,
And I can tell you that in this life, I've been working through some of the grief and remorse, even in this life, as I remembered it. That was part of what I carried into this life to heal, that I'd made decisions that I thought were for my people, but people died, and I felt huge regret. And that wasn't even in this life, but I've been still working on healing that in myself. So sometimes we carry things life to life. It takes a while.
okay, you mentioned that we as souls, we choose our life, what we're going to do in this life. Do you remember that happening with you before you were born?
No, I've tapped into my counsel a little bit. I remember when I heard that for the first time, I was in my 20s. I thought, what was I thinking? I was like, oh no. And why did I choose this? And yet, the further I go and the more work I do, because, my whole life is dedicated to waking up, to healing, to helping others. And I've certainly had my own work to do. That's what's gotten me here, to help other people. And I've realized just I had no idea why I chose what I did 40 years ago or a long time ago. I'm 66 now, and I'm getting more awarenesses about why I chose my dad, why I chose the circumstances, why I was born at the time I was. But no, I did not remember sitting with my counselor going, yeah, I'm going to go down there to that
Yeah.
family. I actually had this sense of, as I was coming in to be born, going, oh no, not that.
I know a lot of us think the same way. Say, I mean, if we make these decisions before we're born, I mean, how come I have to choose this life?
Like
But
they didn't show us the fine print.
there is a reason for everything. Well, people say that to evolve faster, to become wiser, and to maybe leave the wheel of samsara forever. I mean, in the Buddhist, and it's called samsara, the
Right.
wheel of life, the reincarnations. If I'm not
Yes.
mistaken, maybe I'm not right. Somebody's going to
No, you're
correct
right.
me. correct me in
No,
the yeah. All right. So now, can we do a reading very quickly? I mean, well, actually, take your
sure.
time. It depends. Let's do a reading about the current events.
Okay.
I live in Eastern Europe, and Ukraine is like 5 miles from here.
So
Right,
you're in
right.
it.
5 minutes drive. And
Wow.
I'm in Moldova, which is the next country after Ukraine, is between Romania and Ukraine. In Russia, it's a little further away, but it's getting closer here. So I would like to ask that if you can, what's going to happen, and also what's going to happen in the world, because it's getting a little bit tumultuous everywhere. In Israel, Taiwan, everywhere is like some kind of tension right now. Yeah, can we? Are you asking the guides when you're doing the tarot reading?
Yes,
Okay,
I asked all the goddesses and the guides, the
okay,
helpers that I work with, and the higher beings who can bring us light to
yeah,
this.
all right,
And I'll take that question of what's going to happen as to what do we need to know that's in our best interest? What can we do about it?
okay,
And how do we show up? And because I know it, um, I typically do a 15 card spread. Let me see. That could take a little while. Let me see. I'm going to throw the cards. I will go ahead and do that. So my readings are definitely esoteric. No matter how physical we are looking at a reality, they always are about what does the soul need to know? Because I feel like we've got to bring that to the circumstance for the highest possibility to come out. That it's just not, again, happening to us. Somehow collectively we are here together in this circumstance to learn. And that one of the other things I want to say is collectively, on a spiritual level, we have more power than most of us believe.
yeah,
It feels so far away for, say, us in the US, even if we know people. I've met more than a few people from the Ukraine in the last year, which is fascinating. They've lived here for a while, and I'm just now meeting them. And we're in this big environment, and we're at a point of a huge spiritual shift. It doesn't look like it because there's so much chaos in the world, but we are supposedly, one Indian guru that I just saw his thing, I've known that we're in the Kali Yuga or at the end of the Kali Yuga. This guy says that we've completed the Kali Yuga. It's about a 2,500 year cycle that says we're moving toward the golden age now. It does not look like it.
yeah,
And we're in the Aquarian age. You look at astrology, it's like we are completing some cycles. There's a lot of chaos and a lot of negativity still, and yet there are some positive things going that are hopefully shifting us into a new direction. I just want to kind of put that into that all this war, all the chaos, all the disruption feels like it, and I don't know how long it'll go on. And I'm going to look at the cards and say something about that. But um, this is a wake up call. As much as we've had war for thousands of years, there are many people becoming more conscious, and this is our job to do our best to focus on the light, that whatever we focus on expands, and that we do make a difference. The quantum field is responding to us as we change, and we quit feeding the cycles of war. Those of us who can stop it need to do it. So I did a 15 card spread. The 3 cards in the middle are like, who's humanity now in regards to this situation, this question you have? Who are we? And as I look at it, I've got some cards here, and this card doesn't look like it fits based on what we're saying. It's an integrity card. Are we really in integrity? Is humanity in integrity? It doesn't look like it. But there is some part of us that I'm going to just say, let's look at this card and see what it has to say in addition to this balance card and this sacrifice card, and I'll explain them, is on some level, spiritually, there is some balance taking place between the dark and the light, the good and the bad, the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. Do I understand what that means in regards to your question? Not yet. I want to look at the whole reading to see what else that has to say. The integrity card is interesting to have here because it doesn't make sense to my conscious mind right now. And I'm like, what does this mean too? And it's going to sound like Katherine doesn't know what the hell she's talking about, but I'm going to come back to that and try and make sense of all this. Is that this card has to do with fire. This card has to do with connection to uh, the inner self as well as our outer expression. It is both about the sun and the moon, which is interesting because right now in North America, we've got the moon, and I imagine this is all over the world. We've got summer solstice in North America, and we've also got this full moon in Capricorn, and we've got Cancer just came in. So we got this male and female energy. We've got this mother-father energy coming in. And I think this has to do with our subconscious and our conscious minds. That even though in this outer reality where there's a lot of war, is that there's something else happening to bring in some change. Do I know what it is yet? No. Do I know the timing yet? No. This is just looking at some foundational cards that there's some more going on than what we want to believe as we're focused on war. If we only look at war, that's all we're going to see. So we need to open our expansion of our focus to see that there's more going on than just the war in the world, to help offset it and maybe know that there might be some change taking place, but we can't see it if we're just looking at these horrible situations. I hope that makes sense. One of the things that does make sense to me with those first two cards is Mother Mary. In a traditional tarot deck, she is the hanged man, which means things are stuck. And in this deck, when she came in, I asked Sage, the author, why Mother Mary? She said it's because her story of giving her only begotten son. And I'm like, and tell me more. And so this is a sacrifice card in our deck. And what it means is that we are sacrificing. There are certain souls who've signed up to leave, as hard as this is to believe on a human level. There are certain souls that have signed up to go through this horrible circumstances of war where they're sacrificing their lives, they're sacrificing the way they live. The land is being sacrificed. The cities are being sacrificed. But the word means to make sacred. Right now, it doesn't look sacred. Nothing looks sacred when it comes to war. It's just horrific loss. But on a spiritual level, those souls who are leaving have some contribution to humanity to say, this is not okay. They're going back to light. They're okay. Their human selves are not okay. Their spirits are okay. It leaves everybody behind in great sadness and upheaval. So on a spiritual level, there is some redemption going on in that part of those souls who are leaving are doing their best to play a role in this dream world of our humanity, of reality, this reality, that we need to make some change where we stop killing one another, if that makes sense. So let's look at that in regards to the rest of what's going on here. Does any of this make sense so far, Sergey?
No.
Okay. Well, let's see if I can make some sense of it.
No, a little bit.
In that, I'm just going to kind of do an overview of what I see here. So there's a purification taking place with what I see here in the big picture on a soul level. Part of this war and this conflict that we have in humanity has been going on for a long time. This is not new, unfortunately, or fortunately. I don't know what to say about that. But this is bringing an awareness to many, many more people because of the age that we're in. We know about it. We've got this digital age. It's reported more. Some people are getting more hardened because of it, lacking hope. Others are knowing how important it is we have to do something incredibly different and come to some new answers. Some of the leaders are not going to get this, but there is a process of purification taking place. The purification is for all the places we've dishonored ourselves and one another. Pele is one of the cards that's the tower card in a traditional deck. And in our deck, it's this Hawaiian goddess Pele, who is about volcanoes. And when she shows up in a reading, she says, wherever there has been this destruction, a disrespect of the land, a disrespect of each other, there's going to be a purification for new life to come. That she, through this purification through war, which is doesn't seem like it should be happening. But there will be new life that's going to come out of this. It's going to create something different and more union. Now, can I answer how long this is going to go on? No, I don't know that I can. But in the big picture, what's working spiritually is that humanity has been so dense and so angry and against one another. This is a wake up call again, but it's different. We're at a different day, age, and time. And astrologically, it tells me and spiritually tells me that this is about coming back to unification in the long run, one with self and spirit, one with people. That is what is going to come from this. Right now, we are facing fear that this will not stop. We're facing fear in ourselves for our own lives, many people. And that the only way to heal that is to come back to heart. Again, how do we get our leaders to do that? I don't have an answer in this moment, but that's what has to happen, is that whatever activists, whatever peoples, whatever prayers we can do, it's about coming back to heart. Uh, this is also right now, it looks like we can't get to the sacred part of this. We can't find the spirituality in any of it. And we don't know how to regenerate. And that's what our task is right now, is to find the spiritual thread that will speak to everyone in every country, to find our way back to one another, and to also find that in doing so, that there's a regenerative energy that begins to take place. There's incredible failure going on right now. This cannot continue. And so we have to look at, there's one card in particular here, the Ace of Fire, that I want to, right now we're being called to be courageous, courageous in our hearts, courageous in our passions to heal, courageous in, this is what the action is for everybody who wants to change war. We have to be courageous to stand up and not be afraid of these leaders who are decimating countries and one another in their own countries. That we have to have the courage to stand up to stop this, but we have to do it through heart and love. We have to clear out the fear. That's not an easy thing, but that is what our task is. This Ace of Fire tells me there is a new beginning at hand, that this is a Kundalini card. This is an illumination card. It's also one of freeing the mind from the fear. So it's a thing to do. So all of us who are wanting to make a difference, even if we're not going to pick up arms and go to war, is that we've got to figure out what we stand for and then to practice it as best as we can to make a difference. The failure card sits in the action. When I see that sitting in the action, it tells me that what is going on cannot continue. And so it's like, well, what do you do about it? Well, we have to plant seeds in fertile ground. We can't go to the leaders that aren't listening, aren't paying any attention. They're not going to hear it. They're not going to change. We have to find our way around that, to find the people willing to stand up to create the change, to find our way. Do I know exactly what that looks like? No. I just know that that's what we have to realize, is that we've got to come up with some new ways, some creative ways to find other answers and talk to the leaders that we have to stop going to war. Yeah, do I answer you exactly? No, I'm not. We're in a time of expansion and more consciousness coming in. I can't tell you a length of time. Let me see if I can get any answers. I don't have a length of time of what this might be with all these. The wars feel like in many ways they're going to continue. That how long, I don't know, in this cycle. But every individual has to choose what is their path to light, what is their path to love. As each one of us does that, it's going to affect the collective of what's possible to end these conflicts. And so we have to do it one at a time. But also, if we will gather in places together, there's power there too, exponential power. So I hold ceremonies. They're all very spiritually focused, but world peace is definitely one part of what we're focused on, is personal peace and world peace. So We have to do our best to quit going to war with ourselves and with one another in small places. And that's going to contribute to the possibility of shift in these bigger places, these bigger arenas.
Okay, Katrin, thank you very much for this. Now, if people want to find more about you, about what you do, about your paintings, about your books, would you like to mention that in this podcast?
Thank you, Sergey. Yeah, my website is katherineskaggs.com. If you can see my name down at the bottom and spell it, that's where you can find me. You can find articles, you can find readings on there. I've got a YouTube channel under Katherine Skaggs also, and on Facebook. But I've got books on Amazon, Artist Shaman Healer Sage, The Mythical Goddess Tarot Deck, The Master's Light Wisdom Oracle. But you can always come to my site, drop me a note through my contacts. I'll always talk to you. And if you want a session, you can find all my different things that I do on there.